Thank you everyone for participating. Let us begin the webinar series on the new concept of the corporation, co-hosted by RIETI-ECGI and WBF. Throughout the webinar series, we are discussing a new concept of the corporation, the design of corporate law, duty of directors, the role of activist funds, and the institutional investors, and the purpose of the corporation. This is the third episode of the series. We will highlight ownership of the new corporation and the role of activist funds. Today, we welcome Professor Colin Mayer at Oxford University and Professor Julian at London Business School. After the two keynote presentations, we are also joined by two activist funds from Europe and Japan. Ms. Friederike Helfer, partner at the Sabian Capital, and Mr. Yasunori Nakagami, representative director and chief executive officer, Misaki Capital, consulting fellow RIETI. Ms. Helfer and Mr. Nakagami will bring us their perspective on how activist funds are serving the purpose of the corporation. We are having an audience from academia, business representative, government officials, and media today. We can see how much our topic today attracts interest from a wide range of stakeholders in our society from both Japan, UK, and Europe. It's going to be a very interesting session. First, I would like to invite Professor Hideaki Miyajima, Waseda University, our faculty fellow at RIETI, for his introduction of today's webinar.
Thank you, Watanabe-san. Thank you for participating in the webinar series of new concept of corporation. Over the last few years, and particularly since the onset of COVID-19, the purpose of the corporation has been the subject of active debate. And on the occasion of the publication of the Japanese translation of Colin's book, Prosperity, in this April, with the Japanese title, 株式会社の規範のコペルニクス的転換, ECGI, RIETI, and WBF jointly organized the webinar series on the new concept of the corporation and the UK-US experience and its lesson for Japanese corporate governance reform. The message of the Colin's book is crystal clear in the sense that instead of former shareholder value maximization, let us set the solving the problem with a profitable way as a purpose of corporation. So for realizing this transformation to purposeful firm, Colin suggests that ownership, governance, measurement of performance, corporate strategy, law, regulation, these are coherently redesigned. So considering on his proposal, this webinar series are constructed as follows in a stream. So taking a 5 episode, episode 1 address the concept of the new corporation. Episode 2 address the law and governance, and episode 3 and 4 address the relevant ownership structure, and last episode address the corporate strategy for purposeful firms. So according to the Colin's idea, the relevant ownership which upholds the purposeful firm is the parallel ownership of long-term commitment owners and portfolio investors. Given this framework, so this episode 3 addressed the role of activist fund, and then next episode 4 in June, we will examine the role of institutional investor. So let me suggest the 5 topics that this episode 5 try to address. So first issue of this seminar, this webinar is the current situation of ownership. So outsider-dominated dispersed ownership in the US and the UK is not the only form of the current ownership structure. Rather, insider-dominated concentrated ownership with a family corporation is very common everywhere in the world. So chapter 4 of Colin's book describes a variety of ownership structure, emphasizing the importance of trust mechanisms that dominated the work of equity market instead of minority shareholder protection. So for us, the understanding the current characteristics of ownership is the starting point of this episode 3. And second topic of this webinar is the bright and dark side of activism. In the context of designing ownership structure uphold purposeful firms, the market for corporate control or activist funds seem to be play a minimal role under Colin's idea. But it is not the case in his argument. So then the question is, in what circumstances activism hostile takeover is justified or wealth creation, and what cases are not justified and just wealth transfer. So this point should be clarified. So Colin would address those issues in the theoretical perspective, especially emphasizing on the difference between shareholding and ownership. And Ms. Frederick Helfer, partner 7 Capital Limited, will also touch upon this issue from actual investors' perspective. The third point, so could you go to next slide? And the third topic is the reality of activism. So sometimes activist is regarded as the prayer to enhance corporate performance. But on the other hand, there are growing literatures which describe the pressure of the activist induce a short-termism at the expense of the long-term investment. So for example, recent EU report stressed this point and suggested the solution. So a third topic of this seminar is the experience of activism around the world. And Julian is expert of this area, examining the role of hedge funds around the world. And Federica will give some remarks on this point from European perspective. And the fourth point of this episode 3 is the potential role of activist fund in Japan. Entering into the 2010 activist fund in Japan have revived again. And including these funds included more diversified form, ranging from confrontational activists to quiet one. And also the new type of institution engagement agency were also established. And Julian, who recently examined active ownership in Japan, would report its activity and outcome by using keywords, public versus private activism. And Mr. Nakagami, who is the president of Misaki Capital Incorporated, this corporation identified itself as a constructive activist using a Julian terminology, private or quiet activist. So he would report its strategy and the current situation in Japan on this point. And the last topic is the legal and regulation issues, such as the dual class shares or collective engagement. So in order to encourage appropriate role of activist fund, there is a series of policy and regulation issues. For example, resolving the excess ratio of market for corporate control, we should consider the appropriate takeover defense, including dual class share or insider ownership. And on the other hand, from making the activism more enforceable, the relation on the collective engagement among institutions is also to be considered. So these are the 5 points we are expecting to discuss in this webinar. So that's for my introduction. Thank you.